The moment Catherine Whitmore's gloved hand touched the brass doorknob of her father's study, she knew her life was about to shatter into 1,000 irreparable pieces. "You will marry Harrison Blackwell in 3 weeks' time, and that is final," her father's voice thundered through the heavy oak door, each word striking her heart like a blacksmith's hammer on an anvil. Catherine pressed herself against the wall in the hallway of their sprawling ranch house outside San Antonio, Texas, her breath catching in her throat as the October wind of 1882 rattled the windows. Harrison Blackwell was a cruel man of 42 years, known throughout the territory for his violent temper and the mysterious disappearance of his first wife 5 years prior. At 22 years old, Catherine had dreamed of many things for her future, but becoming the next Mrs. Blackwell and potentially the next woman to vanish was not among them. She did not sleep that night. Instead, she sat at her bedroom window watching the moonlight paint silver across the Texas plains, formulating a plan that both terrified and exhilarated her. By dawn, she had made her decision. She would run. She would take her mother's mare, provisions she could steal from the kitchen, and the small inheritance her grandmother had left her, hidden in a leather pouch beneath a loose floorboard. She would disappear into the vast wilderness before her father could bind her to a monster. 3 nights later, when the house had settled into silence and her father's snores echoed down the hallway, Catherine, dressed in her simplest riding clothes, braided her auburn hair and crept down the back stairs. The kitchen was dark and cool, smelling of the evening's roasted meat and bread. She packed what she could carry: dried beef, biscuits, a canteen, matches, and a small knife. Her hands trembled as she worked, knowing that if her father caught her, he would lock her in her room until the wedding day. The stable was quiet except for the soft nickering of horses. Her mother's mare, a gentle chestnut named Rosie, seemed to sense the urgency in Catherine's touch as she saddled her quickly. Catherine had just led Rosie out of the stable when she heard the ranch house door slam open behind her. Catherine Elizabeth Whitmore. Her father's roar split the night air like thunder. "You stop right there!" Terror propelled her into the saddle. She kicked Rosie's flanks and the mare leaped forward, hooves pounding against the hard-packed earth. Behind her, she heard her father shouting for the ranch hands, heard the chaos of men scrambling to pursue her. But she had a head start, and Rosie was fresh while their horses would need saddling. She rode north, away from San Antonio, away from Harrison Blackwell, away from the life that would have destroyed her. For 2 days and nights, Catherine pushed northward, following cattle trails and avoiding main roads where her father's men might search. She rationed her food carefully, slept in hidden copses of trees, and kept moving despite exhaustion that made her bones ache. On the 3rd morning, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, and by afternoon, a cold autumn rain began to fall. The temperature dropped rapidly as the rain intensified, soaking through her clothes and chilling her to the core. Rosie struggled through the mud, and Catherine knew they needed shelter soon or they would both perish from exposure. The landscape had changed from open plains to rolling hills dotted with cedar and oak trees. Through the sheets of rain, Catherine spotted a thin column of smoke rising in the distance. Shelter meant people, and people meant danger, but the alternative was freezing to death in the storm. She guided Rosie toward the smoke, her teeth chattering so violently she bit her tongue. The cabin appeared through the downpour like a mirage, a sturdy log structure with a small barn beside it. Catherine slid from Rosie's back, her legs nearly buckling as she led the mare toward the barn. She had just reached the door when it swung open, and she found herself staring at a man who seemed carved from the same rugged landscape that surrounded them. He was tall and broad-shouldered, probably around 27 years old, with dark hair plastered to his head from the rain and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore a simple cotton shirt and worn denim pants, and there was a revolver holstered at his hip. For a long moment they simply stared at each other, rain pouring between them. "Please," Catherine managed through chattering teeth. "I need help." The man's expression shifted from surprise to concern. "Get that horse in the barn," he said quickly, his voice deep and rough like gravel underfoot. "Then get yourself to the cabin. You are half frozen." Catherine did not argue. She led Rosie into the warm, hay-scented barn where two other horses stood in their stalls. The man followed, helping her remove Rosie's saddle with efficient movements born of years of practice. He rubbed the mare down with handfuls of hay while Catherine stood shivering, unable to stop her body from trembling. "Come on," he said, taking her elbow gently. "You need to get warm and dry before you catch your death." He guided her through the rain to the cabin, pushing open the door to reveal a single large room with a stone fireplace where a healthy fire crackled. The space was simple but well-maintained, with a bed in one corner, a rough-hewn table and chairs, shelves lined with supplies, and cooking implements hanging near the hearth. The man steered her toward the fire, then disappeared behind a curtain that sectioned off part of the cabin. "Here," he said, returning with a thick wool blanket and what appeared to be a clean cotton shirt. "There is a screen you can change behind. Get out of those wet clothes before hypothermia sets in." Catherine's fingers were too numb to work the buttons on her shirt. She fumbled uselessly, tears of frustration welling in her eyes. The man noticed her struggle, and after a moment's hesitation, he stepped closer. "May I help?" he asked quietly, his eyes meeting hers with a respect that surprised her. "I promise I am a gentleman." Catherine nodded, too cold and exhausted to care about propriety. His fingers were warm and careful as he unbuttoned her shirt, his gaze fixed firmly on his work and nothing else. Once he had helped her with the buttons, he turned his back to give her privacy while she stripped off the wet garments and wrapped herself in the blanket, then pulled on his shirt, which hung nearly to her knees. "I am Thomas Reed," he said, still facing away. "I run cattle on the land north of here. Are you in trouble, Miss Catherine?" she replied, her voice steadier now that warmth was seeping back into her limbs. "Catherine Whitmore, and yes, I suppose I am in terrible trouble." Thomas turned around, his expression serious. "Are you running from the law?" "No," Catherine said quickly. "I am running from my father. He arranged a marriage for me to a cruel man, Harrison Blackwell. Do you know of him?" Thomas's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening. "I know of him. I knew his first wife, Emma. She was kind to me once when I was just starting out, sold me my first breeding bull at a fair price when others would not give a young cowboy the time of day. 6 months later, she was dead. Blackwell claimed she fell from her horse, but there were whispers." "I believe every whisper," Catherine said, sinking into one of the wooden chairs near the fire. "I would rather die out here than marry that man." Thomas poured coffee from a pot near the hearth, handing her a steaming cup. "Your father will be searching for you. If he finds you, he can force you to return. The law gives fathers that right." "I know," Catherine whispered, wrapping her hands around the warm cup, "but I cannot go back. I cannot marry Harrison Blackwell." Thomas studied her for a long moment, and Catherine saw something shift in his eyes, a decision being made. "Then you will stay here until it is safe. I have supplies enough for 2, and this cabin is remote enough that searchers are not likely to find it. But you should know, if your father's men do come, harboring a runaway daughter could bring me trouble." "Why would you risk that for a stranger?" Catherine asked, searching his weathered face for answers. "Because Emma Blackwell showed me kindness when I needed it, and I could not save her," Thomas said quietly. "Maybe I can save you instead." The rain continued for 3 more days, turning the world outside the cabin into a gray, sodden landscape. Catherine remained inside, watching through the window as Thomas went about his daily work, tending his small herd of cattle, repairing fence lines, chopping wood for the fire. When he returned each evening, soaked and tired, he would find that Catherine had prepared a meal from his supplies, doing what she could to earn her keep. On the 4th night, as they sat at the small table sharing a supper of beans and cornbread, Thomas asked about her life before she ran. Catherine found herself talking more than she had intended, telling him about her mother who had died when she was 15, about her father's increasing obsession with wealth and social standing, about the suffocating expectations placed upon her as the daughter of a prominent rancher. "I wanted to see the world," she admitted, staring into her coffee cup. "I wanted to make my own choices, live my own life. Is that so terrible?" "No," Thomas said firmly. "That is not terrible at all. Every person deserves the right to choose their own path. Did you choose this life?" Catherine asked, gesturing to the cabin around them. Thomas smiled slightly, the expression transforming his serious face. "I did. My father wanted me to take over his mercantile in Austin, but I could not stand being cooped up indoors all day. I wanted open spaces, wanted to work with my hands, wanted to build something that was mine alone. He did not understand, but I left anyway. We have not spoken in 5 years. Do you regret it?" Catherine asked softly. "Not for a single day," Thomas replied, his eyes meeting hers across the table. "This life is hard and lonely sometimes, but it is mine. That matters more than comfort or approval." As the days passed, Catherine and Thomas fell into an easy rhythm. She took over the cooking and mending, discovering that she enjoyed the practical work far more than the needlepoint and music lessons her father had insisted upon. Thomas taught her how to milk the cow he kept in the barn, how to gather eggs from the small flock of chickens, how to read the weather by watching the sky. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, talking about everything and nothing, sharing stories of their lives and dreams. Catherine found herself watching Thomas when he did not notice, admiring the careful way he moved, the gentleness in his hands when he doctored a sick calf, the quiet strength that seemed to emanate from him like heat from the hearth. She had never met a man like him, someone who listened when she spoke, who valued her thoughts and opinions, who treated her as an equal rather than a possession to be managed. 2 weeks after her arrival, Catherine woke to find frost on the cabin windows and Thomas already gone to tend the cattle. She dressed quickly, pulling on the spare pair of pants and shirt Thomas had given her, which she had altered to fit better. She was frying bacon for breakfast when the cabin door burst open and Thomas strode in, his expression grim. "Your father's men are in the area," he said without preamble. "I rode up to the ridge this morning and saw 6 riders searching the valley to the south. They are working their way north." Catherine's blood turned to ice. "They will find this cabin eventually." "Yes," Thomas agreed. "We have perhaps 2 days, maybe 3. We need to decide what to do." "I could keep running," Catherine said, though the thought filled her with despair. She had been happy here, happier than she could remember being in years. The thought of leaving Thomas, of going back to being alone and hunted, made her heart ache. "Or you could stay," Thomas said quietly. "If you were married to another man, your father could not force you to wed Blackwell." Catherine's breath caught in her throat. "What are you saying?" Thomas crossed the room to stand before her, his storm-gray eyes intense. "I am saying that I would marry you, Catherine Whitmore, if you would have me. Not because I pity you or because I think you need saving, but because these past 2 weeks have been the best of my life. You are smart and funny and brave, and I find myself thinking about you every moment we are apart. I know it is fast, I know we have not known each other long, but out here, time moves differently. What matters is what is in here." He placed his hand over his heart. "And my heart is telling me that I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life." Catherine felt tears streaming down her face, but they were not tears of sadness. "I thought I was alone in feeling this way," she whispered. "I have been terrified that once I am safe you will send me away, and I realized I do not want to leave. I want to stay here with you, Thomas Reed. I want to build a life with you." Thomas cupped her face gently in his calloused hands, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "Is that a yes?" "Yes," Catherine breathed. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Catherine felt as though she had finally found the place where she belonged. When they broke apart, both were smiling despite the danger that approached. "There is a circuit preacher who comes through the settlement at Miller's Creek, about 10 miles east," Thomas said. If we ride out at first light tomorrow, we can be married by afternoon and return before your father's men reach this area. Once we are wed, the law will recognize you as my wife, and your father will have no claim on you." They spent the rest of that day preparing for the journey and for what would come after. Thomas showed Catherine how to shoot his rifle, teaching her to brace it against her shoulder and sight down the barrel. She proved to be a natural shot, hitting the target he set up more often than not. That night they sat close together by the fire, Thomas's arm around her shoulders, planning their future. "I want to expand the herd," Thomas said. "Maybe build a larger house in a few years, something with multiple rooms and a real kitchen for you." "I do not need luxury," Catherine said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I just need you and the freedom to live as I choose." "You will have both," Thomas promised, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I swear it." They set out before dawn the next morning, riding east through a landscape painted gold and crimson by autumn. Catherine rode Rosie while Thomas sat astride his sturdy buckskin gelding. They spoke little during the journey, both nervous about what lay ahead, but Thomas reached over several times to take her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. Miller's Creek was a small settlement consisting of a general store, a blacksmith, a saloon, and a dozen scattered houses. The circuit preacher, a weathered man named Reverend Johnson, was preparing to depart for his next stop when they arrived. When Thomas explained their situation, leaving out the detail of Catherine being a runaway, the Reverend agreed to perform the ceremony immediately. They were married in the tiny church, a simple wooden building with rough-hewn pews and a cross made of pine branches hanging above the altar. The storekeeper and his wife served as witnesses, and Catherine felt a strange mix of emotions as she spoke her vows. This was not the wedding she had imagined as a girl, with a white dress and flowers and all her friends in attendance. But as she looked into Thomas's eyes and promised to love and honor him, she knew this was far better than any grand ceremony could have been. This was real. This was her choice. This was love. When Reverend Johnson pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas kissed her with such tenderness that Catherine felt her heart might burst from happiness. They signed the marriage certificate, ensuring the union was legal and binding, and Thomas paid the Reverend with coins from his leather pouch. The ride back to the cabin seemed shorter, filled with stolen kisses and laughter. They arrived as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Thomas dismounted first, then helped Catherine down, his hands lingering at her waist. "Welcome home, Mrs. Reed," he said softly. "I love the sound of that," Catherine replied, wrapping her arms around his neck and kissing him deeply. They tended the horses together, working side by side as the stars began to appear overhead. Inside the cabin, Thomas built up the fire while Catherine prepared a simple supper. They ate quietly, the weight of what had happened settling over them. They were married now, bound together by law and by choice. When the meal was finished and the dishes cleaned, an awkward silence fell between them. Catherine's heart raced as she realized what traditionally came next on a wedding night, but she was not afraid. She trusted Thomas completely. Still, the reality of sharing a bed with a man, even one she loved, made her nervous. Thomas seemed to sense her apprehension. He took her hand gently, leading her to sit beside him on the bed. "Catherine, I want you to know that we can take this as slowly as you need. I will not rush you or force you into anything you are not ready for." Catherine looked up at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, the love written across his face. "I am ready," she said quietly. "I am nervous, but I am ready. I trust you, Thomas." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Catherine felt the last of her fear melt away. Thomas was patient and gentle, taking his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished. When they finally came together as husband and wife, Catherine understood for the first time what it meant to give yourself to someone completely, body and soul. This was nothing like the clinical, frightening descriptions she had heard from unhappily married women. This was beautiful. This was love. Afterward, they lay tangled together beneath the quilts, Catherine's head resting on Thomas's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder, and she felt utterly content, utterly safe. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Thomas replied, tightening his arms around her. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." "I could never regret this," Catherine said firmly. "You gave me my freedom, Thomas. You gave me my life back." "You gave me something too," Thomas said quietly. "You gave me a reason to build something bigger than myself. You gave me a future worth dreaming about." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, both smiling despite knowing that tomorrow might bring trouble. The trouble arrived 3 days later in the form of Catherine's father and 5 of his ranch hands. Catherine was hanging laundry on the line Thomas had strung between 2 trees when she heard the thunder of approaching hooves. Her heart lurched into her throat as she recognized her father's massive black stallion at the head of the group. Thomas emerged from the barn, rifle in hand but not yet raised. Catherine ran to his side, and he put his arm around her protectively as the riders approached. James Whitmore was a large man with iron-gray hair and a face like carved granite. He dismounted heavily, his eyes fixed on his daughter with a mixture of fury and relief. "Catherine, get on your horse. We are going home." "No," Catherine said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "I am home. This is my home now." "Do not be ridiculous," her father snapped. "You have embarrassed me, embarrassed our family, and broken your word to Harrison Blackwell. The wedding is in 4 days, and you will be there." "There will be no wedding to Harrison Blackwell," Thomas said calmly. "Catherine is already married, to me." James Whitmore's face turned an alarming shade of red. "You kidnapped my daughter. I will have you hanged for this." "He did not kidnap me, father," Catherine said firmly, stepping forward. "I came here of my own free will. Thomas gave me shelter when I was freezing in a storm, and he married me because we love each other. We have a legal marriage certificate, signed and witnessed. I am his wife now, and there is nothing you can do to change that." "You are a fool," her father spat. "What kind of life can this nobody cowboy give you? You were raised in comfort, raised to be a lady. You will live in squalor with this man and regret your stupidity within a year." "I would rather live in this cabin with Thomas than in a mansion with Harrison Blackwell," Catherine shot back. "Or did you truly not know what kind of man you were selling me to? Did you not hear the whispers about Emma Blackwell's death? Or did you simply not care because he had money and influence?" Her father's silence was answer enough. Catherine felt her heart break a little, realizing that her father had valued wealth over her safety, over her life. "You are no daughter of mine," James Whitmore said coldly. "If you choose this life, you choose to lose everything. Your inheritance, your family name, any support I might have provided, you will be dead to me." The words should have hurt more than they did, but Catherine found she felt only relief. "Then I am dead to you," she said quietly. "Goodbye, father." James Whitmore stared at her for a long moment, and Catherine thought she saw something like regret flicker in his eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. He remounted his horse, jerking the reins savagely. "When you come crawling back, and you will, do not expect me to welcome you. I will tell everyone you died out here in the wilderness. As far as society is concerned, Catherine Whitmore no longer exists." "Good," Catherine said. "She does not. Catherine Reed stands here now, and she is happier than Catherine Whitmore ever was." Her father rode away without another word, his men following behind him. Catherine and Thomas stood together, watching until the riders disappeared over the horizon. Only then did Catherine allow herself to shake, the adrenaline draining from her body. "Are you all right?" Thomas asked, pulling her close. "I am better than all right," Catherine said, surprised to find she meant it. "I am free, truly free. He has no power over me anymore." "What he said about you regretting this life," Thomas began, but Catherine cut him off with a kiss. "I will never regret choosing you," she said fiercely. "Never. This life, this cabin, our future together, that is all I want. That is all I will ever want." Thomas held her tight, and Catherine felt the last ties to her old life finally sever. She was Catherine Reed now, wife of a cowboy, and she had never been happier. The winter that followed was harsh, with deep snows and bitter cold that kept them confined to the cabin for days at a time. But Catherine found joy in the intimacy of those long winter nights, learning every detail of her husband's face, every story from his past, every dream he held for their future. They talked for hours, made love by firelight, and planned for the spring. When the snow finally melted and the first green shoots appeared on the prairie, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but when she finally told Thomas, his reaction made her laugh with delight. He picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy, then immediately set her down gently as though she might break. "I am not made of glass," she teased, but she loved his protectiveness. "You are carrying our child," Thomas said, his hand coming to rest on her still flat stomach. "Our son or daughter? Catherine, you have made me the happiest man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and summer. Thomas expanded the cabin, adding a second room that would serve as a nursery. He built a cradle from oak wood, sanding it smooth and carving their initials into the headboard. Catherine sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her heart swelling with love for the child she had not yet met. On a crisp October morning in 1883, exactly 1 year after she had fled her father's ranch, Catherine went into labor. Thomas rode hard to fetch the midwife from Miller's Creek, a capable woman named Mrs. Henderson who had delivered half the babies in the territory. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the day and into the night, but when Catherine finally heard her baby's first cry, every moment of pain was forgotten. "It is a boy," Mrs. Henderson announced, placing the squalling infant on Catherine's chest. "A healthy, strong boy." Catherine looked down at her son, at his tiny, perfect features and shock of dark hair, and felt tears of joy streaming down her face. Thomas knelt beside the bed, his own eyes wet as he reached out to touch his son's tiny hand. "He is perfect," Thomas whispered. "You are perfect." "Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for this gift." They named him James Thomas Reed, after both their fathers, hoping that perhaps one day Catherine's father might soften enough to meet his grandson. But whether he did or not, Catherine knew her son would grow up surrounded by love, free to make his own choices, free to be whoever he wanted to be. The years that followed were full of hard work and simple joys. Thomas's cattle operation grew steadily, and they eventually built the larger house he had promised, with a real kitchen and multiple bedrooms. Catherine started a small garden, growing vegetables and herbs, and even began raising chickens for eggs and meat. She discovered she had a talent for healing, learning from Mrs. Henderson how to treat common ailments and injuries, and soon neighbors were coming to her for help when they were sick or hurt. James grew into a curious, energetic child with his father's gray eyes and his mother's auburn hair. He followed Thomas everywhere, learning to ride almost before he could walk, helping with chores as soon as he was big enough. Catherine would watch them together, her heart full to bursting with love for her little family. When James was 3 years old, Catherine gave birth to twin daughters, Mary and Rose, named after Catherine's mother and her faithful mare. Thomas was beside himself with joy, doting on his daughters as much as he did his son. The cabin rang with laughter and childish shrieks, with bedtime stories and lullabies. One evening, when James was 7 and the twins were 4, a rider approached the ranch as the family was finishing supper. Catherine's heart clenched with old fear, but Thomas squeezed her hand reassuringly as he went to meet the visitor. The man was elderly, dressed in a fine suit that seemed out of place in the rugged landscape. He dismounted slowly, and Catherine realized with a shock that she recognized him. It was Samuel Green, her father's lawyer. "Mrs. Reed," he said formally, removing his hat. "I apologize for arriving unannounced. I have been searching for you for some time." "Why?" Catherine asked warily, stepping onto the porch with Thomas beside her. "Your father passed away 6 months ago," Mr. Green said gently. "Pneumonia. Before he died, he changed his will. He left you everything, Mrs. Reed. The ranch, the cattle, all of it. He wanted me to find you and deliver this letter." He held out an envelope, yellowed with age, and Catherine took it with trembling hands. She did not open it immediately, instead inviting Mr. Green to stay for coffee and rest his horse. Once he was settled with Thomas and the children, Catherine went outside to read her father's final words to her. The letter was short, written in her father's bold hand but shaky in a way that spoke of illness. "Catherine, I have been a stubborn, foolish old man. I let pride and ambition blind me to what mattered most, your happiness and safety. I heard that you married, that you built a good life with an honest man, and that you have children. I heard you are happy. I am glad. I am sorry I was not there to see it, sorry I chose my pride over my daughter. I hope you can forgive me. The ranch is yours. Do with it what you will. Your father, James Whitmore." Catherine read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. She felt a complex mix of emotions: sadness for the relationship they had never repaired, anger at the years lost, but also a strange sense of peace. Her father had acknowledged his mistakes. He had tried, at the end, to make things right. She returned to the cabin and showed Thomas the letter. They talked long into the night about what to do with the inheritance. The ranch was worth a fortune, but neither of them wanted to leave the life they had built. In the end, they decided to sell the property, using the money to expand their own operation and to establish a fund that would ensure their children's futures. But Catherine kept one thing from her father's estate: a portrait of her mother that had hung in the parlor. She placed it in a place of honor in their home, a reminder of where she had come from and how far she had traveled. Life continued its steady rhythm. The children grew strong and healthy, learning the values of hard work and independence. James announced at 15 that he wanted to study veterinary medicine, and Catherine and Thomas supported his dream, using part of the inheritance to send him to school in Austin. The twins proved to be excellent horsewomen, taking after their mother, and they helped manage the expanding herd with skill and dedication. When Catherine was 38 years old, she gave birth to one final child, a surprise late in life. Another son, whom they named Samuel after the lawyer who had helped reunite Catherine with her father's memory. Thomas joked that they would need an even bigger house, but Catherine could hear the joy in his voice. The years passed with the gentle rhythm of seasons. Catherine and Thomas grew older together, their love deepening with each passing day. They sat together on the porch they had built overlooking the valley, watching sunsets paint the sky in brilliant colors, holding hands as they had since that first winter in the cabin. When their grandchildren began arriving, Catherine felt her heart might burst from happiness. James married a kind schoolteacher and gave them 3 grandchildren. Mary married a neighboring rancher's son, and Rose married the local doctor, each giving them grandchildren who filled the house with noise and love during visits. On their 40th wedding anniversary, Thomas took Catherine back to the original cabin, which still stood on their property, maintained as a reminder of where they had begun. They stood in the single room where they had fallen in love, where they had married, where they had started their life together. "I would do it all again," Catherine said, leaning against her husband. "Every moment, every hardship, every joy, I would choose you again and again." "As I would choose you," Thomas replied, kissing her temple. "You are my greatest adventure, Catherine Reed. The best decision I ever made was opening my door to a half-frozen woman on a storm-swept night. And the best decision I ever made was running," Catherine said. "Running led me here. Running led me to you." They stood together in the cabin as the afternoon light slanted through the windows, 2 people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life from nothing but love and determination. Catherine thought about the frightened girl she had been at 22, desperate to escape a fate worse than death. That girl had been brave, but she had not known what happiness truly meant. Now, at 62, surrounded by family and love, Catherine understood. Happiness was not about comfort or wealth or social standing. Happiness was about freedom, about choice, about finding the person who saw you completely and loved you anyway. Happiness was waking up next to Thomas every morning for 40 years and still feeling her heart skip when he smiled at her. As they walked back to the main house, their hands clasped together, Catherine looked out over the land they had built together. The cattle grazed peacefully in the valley. Smoke rose from the chimney of the house where their youngest son Samuel was preparing supper with his wife and children, and the setting sun painted everything in gold. This was her legacy. Not the money from her father's ranch, not the social position she might have had as Mrs. Harrison Blackwell, but this. A family built on love, a life lived on her own terms, and the knowledge that she had been brave enough to choose her own destiny. She had run from a forced engagement, and she had run straight into the arms of the man who would become her everything. "What are you thinking about?" Thomas asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Catherine replied. "How a single moment of courage changed everything, how running away was really running toward my future." "Our future," Thomas corrected gently. "Everything we built together." "Yes," Catherine agreed, squeezing his hand. "Together, always together." As they reached the house, they were greeted by the sounds of family. Grandchildren laughing, Samuel calling that supper was ready, the clatter of plates being set on the table. Thomas held the door open for Catherine, and she stepped inside, into the warmth and light and love that filled every corner of the home they had created. She had been running from a forced engagement, and a cowboy had hidden her in his cabin until she was safe. But somewhere along the way, safety had transformed into love, hiding had become home, and the cowboy had become her entire world. Catherine had learned that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is stay in a life that is slowly killing you, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is run toward the unknown. She had run, and she had found everything she never knew she needed. She had found freedom. She had found purpose. She had found love, and in the end, that made all the difference. As they sat down to supper surrounded by their family, Catherine caught Thomas's eye across the table and smiled. He smiled back, that same gentle smile that had first made her heart flutter 40 years ago in a small cabin during a storm. Some things, she thought, never changed. And some things, like the love between two people who chose each other freely, only grew stronger with time. This was her happily ever after, earned through courage and built with love. And it was more beautiful than any fairy tale she could have imagined.